Welcome. My name is Tracy Stevens, and this is the Healing Point podcast. So thank you so much for joining me today. I love to have these conversations with people, and they help so many who are listening. So I'm going to hand over to you. What is it that you would like to explore with me today?
I would love to explore my periods. They've always been incredibly painful, to the point where at times I've been on my knees and in tears because they've been so painful, and wondering whether to call an ambulance on one or two occasions because of the pain. And of course, I've gone to the GP and I've had ultrascans and I've had tests, and nothing's cropped up. They can really take me out. It always starts with cramps and pain, and I usually have to take some painkillers, and I usually always have to sleep to be able to get over it or through it. And then usually what follows is a very flat energy.
Okay.
After listening to you and your workshop, I've realised that the best way to describe it was like energy of grief and of sadness. And when I was 13, I lost my dad. And it, 30 something years later,
Yeah.
I don't think you ever escape grief. And the death of a parent is pretty deep. And I can't remember if my period started before he passed away, but all I remember is after he did, my periods were horrendous. I've miscarried once. I haven't been able to conceive. And now that I'm in my mid-40s, I suspect perimenopausal as well. So yeah, I think life is quite hard to navigate with my periods. I kind of start with good energy, and kind of flawed. So it's almost like nearly every month there's a kind of stop, start.
Firstly, thanks for sharing that. And I could sense that grief is still present there in you. And there's a lot of sadness there, which is really relevant, of course. But let's unpick it a little bit more, if you're okay with that. But first, just a few practical questions, really. So does your pain start before your period or when your period starts?
When my period starts, just before the point of bleeding, I get these agonizing cramps.
And the phrase that comes to me is the pain of letting go.
Yeah, now that you say it, yes.
And a repeated pattern. You said nearly every month. So are there months when you don't get the pain?
Yeah, there have been the odd months. I felt that they were getting lesser as I was getting older, but that's not the case.
So something was happening. You felt it was getting better, and then obviously it's not, and it started to worsen again and be difficult again. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got this massive trauma that happened just at the beginning of your adolescence and your puberty. Can I ask you, was your father's death a shock, or was it expected? Or
He had cancer, and this was mid-80s. So I was a kid, and obviously I believed that my dad would survive. I believed in miracles, even though he was given a few months. But the cancer travelled. I know it went to his breast and then into his lymphs and finally into his lungs. So we did know.
yeah. Are you an only child, or have you got siblings? Or
I've got an older brother.
Got an older brother. Okay. What was the atmosphere like between your mum and your brother and you after really difficult time?
Completely fragmented. After that time, I felt completely on my own. And I don't feel that my grief or my situation was ever taken into account. I always felt that it was overshadowed by others.
What sort of form did that take, that overshadowing?
I do remember being shamed into crying and grieving. My mum would call it me seeking attention. So I didn't ever, I then stopped feeling safe in being able to express that grief and that sadness. And if ever I did try to speak out about it, I always remember being told, "What about me?"
And now, as you're speaking that, I mean, what happens inside of you? How does that make you feel?
I'm really sad, really, and still confused. I was very confused about the grieving process. I knew that I was sad to have lost my dad, but I was receiving information from my mother that told me that perhaps I was exaggerating or I was putting it on. And I always kind of had this sense. So I was going to school. And so, for example, when I'd have my periods and they were very painful, I'd go to the nurse. And because they kept happening, I got accused of lying about it to get out of school. So I kind of just felt like I had nowhere to go in my grief and then, my pain.
And listening to you, I'm feeling something else as well. And I don't know if there is another emotion there apart from sadness.
Anger.
I'm just aware of it because you can have two emotions together, of course. But there's a frustration to not being heard, for everything being unacknowledged.
Yeah. And to this day, I do find it quite hard to express that experience because I still feel the shame wrapped in that.
The shame from your mother.
Yeah, being shamed in expressing it, in having my feelings.
When you look back now, what's your impression of how your mum thought about that situation? I'm just wondering, as you look at it now as an adult and she is shaming you for your tears, do you get a sense of what might have been behind her projecting that shame onto you?
No. I do find that quite hard for a parent to have that response to a child.
No. Okay. I suppose what I'm wondering is if she almost couldn't bear to be reminded of your grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because she wasn't coping with her own.
Yeah, my mum comes from a mindset of let's just get on with it.
Keep calm and carry on, post-war type mentality, and very familiar. And there's a hard edge to that, isn't there?
Yeah.
And what's your relationship with your mum like? Is she still with us?
She's still here. I think the best way to describe my mum is she seems to have a personality disorder. It's not proven, but it's the best way to describe her. Sometimes she's lovely and kind, and the other times she can just switch. And sometimes she's talking to you, and sometimes she's
Okay.
It's quite delicate in when she is talking to you and when she's not. She could get offended by very day-to-day things.
Yeah. And was that the case when you were younger as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mum was a bit of a handful for all of us, including my dad.
Okay. So all that emotion, what do you think you did with it?
I think I kept it inside. I remember trying to express it through writing, and that was kind of my only outlet, or I'd go seeking to try and find someone that I felt safe with. I wouldn't say that it really paid off. And I think I'm coming to that realization that it's still there, it'll come out in little spurts. And if someone were to say to me, which I suspect, there's pain there to deal with, it really frightens me. I don't know the size of it. I don't know what will happen. I don't know when it will stop.
So notice the control in that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we do, isn't it? As a survival technique, is we hold everything in. We try to control our environment as much as we can so that we're not accidentally expressing something. We're not accidentally putting ourselves in a vulnerable position to be shamed or shouted at or told off. So everything becomes a way of control. I got to control my environment, got to control my relationships. I've got to control what I say.
I have OCD.
Okay, right.
So, yeah, I'm aware.
Right. Okay. So there's another manifestation of that control then.
Mm.
How are you feeling as we're having this conversation?
I can feel it coming up, but it always kind of gets stuck in my throat.
Okay. Well, just tell me if it's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we'll just carry
Mm.
on and we'll see where it takes us.
Mm.
Because I think what you're describing here is very relatable to many people. And the feelings that you've got inside are very relatable to many people. And the coping mechanisms. Just looking at the period side of things, what messages do you think you got from your mother and maybe grandmother about being a woman, about periods?
There was a kind of subconscious belief that as a woman, it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe to be a woman. Periods were kind of just ignored. They weren't really talked about. I would say that my mum probably treated them like an inconvenience.
Yeah.
She never talked about her periods.
Yeah, so it's something else that's not expressed and not talked about along with everything else. So out of interest, what were the things that she would talk about? She talk about what she valued or
She got into Buddhism when we were younger, and she used to preach some of beliefs around Buddhism, cause and effect, karma, which even as an adolescent, I couldn't take seriously from someone who wasn't demonstrating them.
yeah.
It's very strange since you've asked that question. I don't really know. I think like my mum she's an activist as well, so she's a bit of a fighter. She would probably highlight what was wrong in the world and what we would need to do.
So that's what I was going to say. Would she highlight what was wrong with you?
Yeah, I was never good enough. That's how I felt, and that's how aunts have also told me, as a kid, I was, whatever I did just wasn't good enough. And my mum's never really praised me at all. She does sometimes, but then she'll usually say it's because of her or she's handed down to me.
Yes, so rather than it being in your own right, you're good at something, that bit has to be connected to her.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a pretty good picture here of how you couldn't be you. You couldn't shine
Mm-hmm.
in this space. And it sounds like you still struggle to be you. I'm thinking of the OCD and how sort of limiting that can be as well.
Mm.
It sounds like it's not really safe, or it certainly hasn't been safe for you to be whoever you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense to you then that with all that holding and all that tightness, that when your body wants to release every month, that there's a big battle that goes on?
Yeah, I think my initial thought is, oh God, not this again and not now. I haven't got time for it.
Yeah.
I came off the pill very, very young. I didn't want to control it like that. And I did want it to flow naturally. I think it just comes with so much pain and so
Yeah.
much apprehension. I'm going to say it couldn't flow if it wanted to, if that makes sense, because I just tense up.
Yeah. Okay. This may also be related to why you haven't been able to conceive.
I don't feel I've got much life in me, you know. I'm a very yin person. I teach yin yoga.
Do you? When you were a child, what did you dream of doing?
Being an artist, a fashion designer, something creative.
So I'd just like to invite a different way of looking at that, because my feeling is that you have got lots of life in you, actually. Otherwise, we wouldn't be even here having this conversation. And there's a part of you that really wants to live fully and really wants to spread her wings and get out there and let go of all these limitations around. So it's not completely true.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
And here there's a pause in the recording while we connect to the inner child and do some deep and profound personal work. It's inappropriate to put into the podcast, but connecting these hidden parts of ourselves is very powerful and has the potential to be extremely healing. And we return after this segment.
So this is your past. But how would it feel if that past didn't define your future?
Absolutely awesome. Fantastic. And I feel like mentally I'm there, but something's holding me back, perhaps emotionally.
Well, absolutely. It's in your nervous system. A bit like the OCD is in your nervous system. It's almost like you can't help it. This is where the work is. The picture that you had of when we were doing that little bit of work there of your younger self, bring her into your awareness as you're doing the things that you do today. As you're going to work, imagine what it would be like to have that 13-year-old with you. When you've got a bit of space, it's just ask her, what would you like to do now? And see if you can actually do that in reality. So, I don't know, go and walk in a park, go to the beach, go somewhere that she wants to go dancing. Bring her energy into you, because she's got all the energy. You know, you're saying about being yin. Nothing wrong with being yin, but let's balance it out a bit, because there's a dancer in you, there's a creator in you. And so, you know, this is about taking actions that take you outside of your comfort zone, or what has become your comfort zone, even if it's just trying one new thing, tiny little thing, you know, a month, anything that you can do that will take a step towards your future self and the person that you are. How does that sound?
It sounds fantastic and both frightening.
Okay, well, what I just invite you to do is to keep questioning the fear. Because often we just stop at that point, oh, it's frightening. But really go into it. You know, so it's like asking that your inner self, what am I afraid of? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of will happen if we do this? And what happens is the fears tend to dissolve when you start doing things. You realize that actually the fear is just it feels big because it's up here in your head, but it's a bit of an illusion, and it's the illusion that has been created for you, for your life, to keep you small. And it's not actually true. If you really start to bring awareness to it, and you know that, I think you said your mum was an activist, and she was quite vocal about the things that were wrong with the world and the things that were wrong with you. A child, a teenager, becomes scared of the things that are wrong with the world, and that's scared of the things that are wrong with themselves as well. And it puts a wall up against all the things that you could possibly want to do, because they're saying, and they've been telling you, and it's been ingrained in you. We're hypnotized. We're hypnotized by our teachers and our parents. We take everything in, and we live by their rules rather than our own. Times are changing.
I think, you know, you said wall, and that's what it feels like. And then as you were speaking, I felt what I've heard is their fear, not mine.
Exactly.
Mm.
We do take on their fears, especially the fears of our parents. I was the same. So took on my mother's fears. They're not yours. Majority of them are not yours. You know, we don't come into the world being fearful. You know, we come into the world wanting to grow into our potential, but we just our energy gets pushed in and pushed down as we grow.
Yeah, and I think that's why I was, losing my dad, that potential went, because he was the one that really nurtured me going out into the world and shining. And
yeah, I'd invite you to connect with him too.
He was a very fun man, so that also went when he went.
Yeah,
so more fun activities.
Yeah, and I know that when we first started speaking, that when you first approached me, you had something else that you wanted to speak about.
Yes.
And maybe you just want to say what that is.
Incredibly tight hamstrings.
So now as we're talking, the restriction in your legs, does it make sense?
Yeah, but this is, the thing that I find amusing is that through my practice and through my work in yoga, particularly yin, I'm always at those hamstrings, trying to lengthen. I just never seem to be able to.
In that space, you're forcing them.
Yes.
You're trying to stretch them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if we do it in a different way, so try to stretch your life a little, try to stretch everything else a little, and then see what happens.
Oh my God. I just love that vision. I love, stretching out my life.
Yeah.
Because my life does feel very constricted. I like being at home. I'm not a social animal. I don't have the fear of missing out. I have the comfort of staying at home. And I do realise that I need to expand a little bit.
Well, more than that, more than needing to, I think it's within you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's inside of you. And you can't force it. It's a bit like, you can't force your hamstrings to stretch. But what you can do is become aware of that and think about the things that you would really like to do, that will really inspire you, that make you happy, and take yourself into a space where it just feels a little bit uncomfortable, but it's something new, or I don't know, whatever comes to into your awareness that feels like the right thing, and it feels like something that you could do to stretch yourself a little.
Baby steps.
Baby steps, exactly. Exactly. Has what we've talked about brought some insight for you?
It's brought a lot of insight. It's touched on things that I've suspected, but it's given me greater clarity. And what's really nice is the expressions that you've used, and with that comes the excitement, as well as a little bit of apprehension, but mainly excitement of creating my future in the present.
Yes. Hold on to that bit. You can do it.
Absolutely. I do believe I can. Yeah.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it for a minute. It's all in you. It's all there.
Thank you so much. It's a conversation I'm probably remember for the rest of my life.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, you'll find a lot more content on my Instagram account at thehealingpoint._. If you have a question you'd like to explore and are willing to take part in the podcast, you'll find all the information you need on my website, which is www.tracystevens.org/podcast. Thanks, and see you soon.